Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to Awakening to the Magic of the Menstrual Cycle. I have the beautiful Miss Chloe Skerlak here today. Thank you so much for being here, Chloe.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here.
Definitely. I'm really excited to connect with you in this space today. So I'm just going to read a little bit about Chloe for anybody who's not familiar with her. Miss Chloe is wildly passionate about the menstrual cycle. She is a holistic reproductive health practitioner and certified fertility awareness educator. Chloe's mission is to teach comprehensive and accurate fertility awareness to support people in their sexual and reproductive decision-making, guide people on their journey to body literacy, and break the taboo around the menstrual cycle so more people can fall in love with it too. Yes, yes, and yes to all of that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm definitely wanting more people to really embrace this as a gift and fall in love with it. So you said it beautifully in your bio.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to get started, I want you to share a little bit about your journey and what brought you to this work.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it all started with birth control. So I was in my early 20s. I was looking for birth control options, and I had been on hormonal birth control, and I had been one of those weird people who didn't start it right away to regulate your cycle. Luckily I had a really great period, a really great cycle. I had no problems. But I eventually started dating someone who was adamant on me using hormonal birth control. So I took it for less than a year, and it was so funny because I was a little bit older. So by this point, I'd already had friends who had really nasty experiences on the pill. I'm like, this isn't going to happen to me. I'm going to manifest like a different destiny for this. So I took out a piece of paper and I'm going to lose weight on the pill, and I'm going to have the best skin, and I'm going to have the best sex with my boyfriend whenever I want. We're going to have a great relationship. And I wrote all of these things that were going to happen. And they didn't. Not even a little bit. The opposite, in fact. I lost all of my hair. I had really bad acne. I was either raging in tears or in anger, and it didn't even last a year, and I had had enough. So I was on the search for non-hormonal birth control, and that's when I realized that for us, many of us, the question of birth control is just, how do you like your hormones? In a pill, in a patch, in an IUD, a NuvaRing. So I was looking for something else. And it was funny. I had actually thought of the non-hormonal IUD, and my mother was like, absolutely not. Like, don't do that. And so I just trusted her. And I was convinced that the NuvaRing was like a low hormone dose, so it wasn't going to be as bad. I brought it home, and my boyfriend at the time had asked to see it before I inserted it. And it's like, I had never seen it before. It's like quite a big, I don't know if you've ever seen a NuvaRing, but it's quite a big little ring, quite a big ring. And so I pulled it out, and he's like, you are not putting that penis strangling apparatus up your vagina. That was it. The NuvaRing never went in. And so that's when I discovered the calendar method. And we had a good laugh about that, the idea that you could track on a calendar when you were fertile and avoid pregnancy during that time. So I was almost at my wit's end when I discovered the fertility awareness method. And the fertility awareness method is the method of tracking your signs of fertility on a daily basis to understand when you're fertile or not. So I've been using this method of birth control for myself now for 8 years, and I've been teaching others to use it for 4. So yeah, it started with birth control, and it transitioned into body literacy. So that's what I always tell people. You stay for the birth control, you start for the birth control, but you stay for the body literacy.
Yeah, that's beautiful the way that you put that. I just want to tell you how much I enjoy your enthusiasm wanting to create your own reality and experience birth control, down to like writing out exactly how you wanted it to go. That's awesome. And totally, like, I definitely encourage people to do that for like different areas of life. And it's also okay if everything doesn't pan out to a T the way that you wrote it down, but that's really cute that you
good intentions, right? Yeah. Thank you.
I love your intentions behind that. That was awesome. So how long have you been practicing this method now?
8 years.
8 years. Dang, you must know your body well.
I definitely know it much better than I did 8 years ago.
Mm.
But it is not something that I've struggled with personally, and I've had to coach people and remind people is that when you start your fertility awareness journey, there's not like a graduation. There's not like,
Mm.
okay, you finished the course, here's your certificate. Actually, the graduation is menopause. That's
Ah.
the graduation. But the work continues all through your reproductive years. So
Mm.
you just constantly are learning, you're constantly growing, discovering new things about yourselves, things that worked in the past and don't work anymore, all of a sudden things that didn't work and now they work, or new things about the way you want to live, the way you want to move, the way you want to eat, the way you want to express yourself sexually. Like it's a never ending journey.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I would love to hear a little bit about that in your own personal journey. How, if you could just like think of a couple of circumstances where this has evolved for you, how it just is like a continuous journey of learning. Like,
Mm.
how does that continue to be new for you? What have you personally experienced in your own journey that used to be that isn't anymore?
Oh my gosh, where do I start? 8 years is a long time.
Yeah.
So remember when I mentioned before that I had perfect cycles? I had these perfect
Mhm.
cycles, and when I started charting 8 years ago, it was so clear. And I was like, how could we not know about this? This is so easy. And then when I started studying with the Justice method, which is I'm a holistic reproductive health practitioner with the Justice method, that's when I started discovering how the menstrual cycle is the fifth vital sign and a reflection of your health. And so I started discovering endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome and fibroids and all of these things that can happen and that can show up in our cycles. And I had no idea because we don't talk about these things, right? We just assume however we're cycling, whatever we're experiencing is what everyone's experiencing, which
Yeah.
is why painful periods gets, why we just think it's so normal.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I remember talking to my mentor at the time who was teaching me with the Justice method. And I remember saying, how could I ever relate? Like, how could I relate to people when I'm teaching this if I've never experienced,
Yeah.
cycle irregularities or painful periods? Well, let me tell you, did I eat those words? over 8 years, I went through a time where I was in a suboptimal thyroid condition. I was experiencing a lot of depression, a lot of low body temperature, a lot of fatigue, and loss of, interest in the things that I used to love. And I'd actually guided myself to heal my thyroid through the information coming out of my charts. And so then I was on a good flow again. And then I actually lost my ovulation for almost a whole year, 2 years ago, after a really awful breakup. So not ovulating was super difficult. But again, so funny because I think for many of us, when something unhealthy or not optimal happens to us, we immediately get angry, or we think we're crazy because you go to the doctor and your doctor's like, you're fine, you're fine. You're like, no, I'm not fine. So when I had stopped ovulating, for me, it was like, yeah, I feel ya. Things are not fine right now. And this is temporary and it's okay. So for me, it was a really great practice in just accepting what was, and also a confirmation that, yeah, you're not the best version of yourself right now. This is a very difficult time and you're going to get through this. And I used my cycle as a guide through that. And so when I came back, it was super celebratory. I was super excited, right? I've also used my cycle, so not only for my own health, but for, contraception. So I've used it as contraception for the past 8 years. And now I'm finding myself in a place where I'm super interested in using this information as a way for preconception and to prepare myself to now have children. So that's like a whole, just, when I teach it, I'm like, yeah, you can use it to conceive or you can use it to avoid. But it really is just such a different lens when you see your cycle as something you want to learn to avoid pregnancy versus something you want to learn to achieve pregnancy. It's just, it changes everything. But one of my latest endeavors is also moving with my cycle. So how do I like movement in the first half of my cycle versus how do I move in the second half? And like today is day one for me. So it's like, no exercise, that's fine. There's just no pressure for me to do my usual exercise routine. I just take these next 5 days just to be really chill and rest. And that's how I know that I'm always taking rest days. And then when my follicular phase starts up again and I'm in my springtime, then we transition. So living in flow with the changes of these cycles, of this cycle, whether it's to avoid or achieve pregnancy, to understand your health better, or to just your daily lifestyle choices is, yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's
That's your
changed.
question? I could go on and on and on.
It changed my whole life, basically. Right? It like opens up a whole new dimension and way of living when you start to focus more on your cycle and your natural rhythms. It's fascinating. I love listening to you talk about how some of the information that you have received through your charting has helped you on your healing journey. I would love to hear you expand a little bit about healing the thyroid issue that you were experiencing and how your charting helped you with that.
Absolutely. So thyroid health is super important for your menstrual cycle. In fact, probably I would say that most menstrual cycle irregularities stems from a thyroid issue. And of course, knowing that our whole body is connected to everything and you can't compartmentalize it, like, your thyroid, your adrenals, your, cardiovascular health, and that it's all connected. So still appreciating that part of it. The first thing I look at when I take on a client and we are looking at the chart for her health, that's one of my first things I'll ask is, well, what's your thyroid health like? And what's your history of thyroid health in your family? And looking at, and one other thing too, is I highly rely on the chart and the person's symptoms to tell them and myself about their thyroid health more so than the lab work. Because the problem with the lab work is that, number one, most people aren't getting a full thyroid panel. So most people just get their thyroid stimulating hormone or their TSH tested, but you need to see your TSH, your T3, your T4, your antibodies. You need to see your whole picture. You're not just a piece of the puzzle, right? And so number one, you're not getting all of the information. Number two, we have a range. So we have a range, and this range is different from country to country, from doctor to doctor. And like you have this functional range, like, yes, if you fall in this range, that means you are waking up in the morning, you're drinking 5 cups of coffee, you're going to work, you're going home to bed, you're living your life just fine. It's like, okay, or you could live without without the stimulation of caffeine, and you could enjoy things that you love and have the time to do the things that you want to do, not what you just have to do. And so what's your optimal range, no matter what the lab work says? So, like I said, many menstrual cycle irregularities stems from a suboptimal thyroid problem. So whether that's having really low body temperatures, and of course, part of what I teach and what I do is track my basal body temperature every morning. So for me, that was the number one screaming sign, like, oh, my temperatures are all super low. Also, if, your bleeding patterns, so if you're bleeding too much, you're bleeding not enough, you're having a lot of spotting, and even your cervical mucus observations. So your chart is, your chart is a little mini lab work every single day. So every single day, what you write down on your chart is a reflection of your estrogen progesterone. It's a reflection of your lab work. And that's another big shtick I have with lab work is you get your blood released that one split second of that one moment on that one day, whereas seeing the full picture through your chart.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I like the way that you put it, that it is doing lab work on yourself. I haven't actually done the legit charting for a while, but when I first started learning about this, I charted with devotion for 2 years, and I really enjoyed collecting the information over a period of time and kind of like putting on my scientist hat for my own well-being, and actually like looking at the changes and the differences. And it's like when a woman charts like that for like years, like that is like such an invaluable piece of experience and information. Like that takes serious dedication and years. And you can't buy that, you know, like nobody can do that for you. And it can be so transformative. And I just love how you talk about the way that it can clue you in on so many things. I'm like really interested in that whole concept of the cycle being a fifth vital sign, and kind of like being a window to peer into the overall health of a woman. That's so fascinating to me. And when you really start to look into it like that, and see how incredible observing the cycle is and what it can tell you about your health, it's just like why isn't this something that is like required out of doctors when they're diagnosing women about everything? It's like the most important vital sign to pay attention to, and it's like just now starting to like reemerge in the collective. It's really incredible. So the thyroid, I'm still very new to that piece. Is that where our hormones are created, or is that what regulates them?
Great question. So hormones are part of your endocrine system. And the way I like to describe hormones is there's little chemical messengers that go around, and that's how your body talks to itself. So these chemical messengers are the, telephone between, your brain and your ovaries, for example. So your pituitary gland actually is where everything starts. So if you ever heard that like your brain is your largest sex organ, or it's totally true. So your pituitary gland tells your ovaries to make the estrogen and progesterone, which regulates our cycle. But the estrogen, progesterone, even though they're responsible for ovulation, they're responsible for our production of our cervical mucus and the growing and shedding of our endometrial lining, they have receptors all over your body, in your bones, in your breasts, in your brain. So same thing with your thyroid hormone. Your thyroid hormone is speaking to your whole body too. And it's like a party in there. And so they're all mingling, and they're all, affecting one another. So it's all, and that's why I said already, like, we can't compartmentalize the body, and like, we can't isolate it. And it's all one big, orchestra.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
I love the messengers. I really like it when people can kind of like use analogy like that in a playful way to teach. I think it's like really really effective and a funner way to receive the information. Okay, so I want to talk about cervical mucus. I really like to call it cervical nectar, or I love the word.
I've been calling it the nectar of fertility, the juicy nectar of fertility. So I'm totally picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah. So for anybody that's tuning into this right now that's not really familiar with what that is, or what importance it plays in the cycle or the health, I would love for you to talk about that, especially because I know you're an expert and so passionate about it.
I love cervical mucus. I love cervical mucus. So cervical mucus comes from your cervix, hence the name. And so if you have ever put your finger inside your vagina and reached the very end, and you feel this little grape with a dimple on it, that's your cervix. So your cervix is the gate.
Or a donut
in the uterus. Sorry?
Or a donut, right? It's often
I like to call it a donut too, because it looks like a donut. Yeah. So it has, the surface, it has a little Oz, like the little hole.
Yeah. And this is what the baby comes out of.
Yeah. So your cervix is the gate between your vagina and your uterus, and it only opens 3 times: for a baby, for menstruation, so the uterus's lining sheds and has to come through the cervix, or to release cervical mucus.
Interesting.
Yeah. So here, I'm going to pull up my greater than life-size photo of a cervix for you. We call it nature's gate. I also lovingly call it the Hotel de la Sperm. So there it is. This is a picture of it, like as if a woman was standing straight up and you were looking straight at her pelvis. So the donut, this would be the hole of the donut, right?
Yeah.
And this would be the donut. So this hole goes into this column, which then enters into the uterus. So the uterus is up here and the vagina is down here.
Mm-hmm.
So your cervix makes different kinds of cervical mucus depending on the influence of estrogen or progesterone. When progesterone is dominant, and these are sex hormones that come from your ovaries, when progesterone is dominant, the cervical mucus creates a plug in the cervix. So it acts like a physical barrier. And think about how important this is, because there's nothing in your uterus to protect it from virus or infections. And just take a second to think about the things that go into your vagina that you haven't cleaned. Like, when was the last time you really checked up on that penis? Or how often do you clean your sex toys? Like, you think about it, right? And so it's important that we have this plug that doesn't allow things into the uterus, but it also prevents sperm from getting into the uterus.
Wait. I want to make sure that I'm following you. So this is a specific kind of mucus that creates a plug in the cervix?
Yes.
And that's not the fertile stuff.
That's right. This is like, the hotel is closed. The gate is closed. Nothing is getting in.
And what part of your cycle is it closed?
So once we ovulate, progesterone becomes dominant. So the second half of our cycle, progesterone prevents us from ovulating again. And just like the hormone the name suggests, progestation, it means pro-pregnancy. So it's like, nope, we're hoping that there's like an embryo in there, nothing can get in, lock it down, save this embryo, right? Of course, this happens whether or not an embryo or an egg is fertilized. And so then the progesterone then continues to create this plug until the whole cycle starts again. And then estrogen releases the plug. So now we've menstruated, maybe 3, maybe 7 days. Then you might find that the plug is still there, so you don't see any cervical mucus. Maybe cycle day 8, 9, 10, sometimes even later, 13, 14, 15, but eventually you'll see a change. And you'll see this cervical mucus present on your toilet paper.
That's around when you're fertile and being released, right?
So
cool.
The reason why you're fertile is because this gate opens. So estrogen opens the gate, the cervical mucus is released, it comes down the vagina, essentially is a red carpet rolling out for the sperm. Come on in. The cervical mucus, it creates a pH that's sperm friendly, so that's favorable for the sperm. It even nourishes the sperm. It even decides which sperm can get in and which can't. So if there's defective sperm, it won't let it in. And did you know sperm come with their own condoms?
No.
There's a film on the sperm that has to be removed in order for the sperm to fertilize the egg. So this process is called capacitation. So capacitation has to occur in cervical mucus, which is why people who have in vitro fertilization, they have to do a sperm wash first.
Okay, so this film around the sperm, does the fertile cervical mucus or nectar, does that like dissolve the film, or at what point does that come off of the sperm?
It's the process called capacitation, and just as the sperm go through the cervical mucus, it prepares the sperm for fertilization.
Okay, so it is as it travels through it. I also, at one point in time, I came across a book or something that was talking about how it doesn't actually take one sperm to fertilize an egg. It takes like a whole team of them working in like a certain kind of positioning to help get one in. Have you heard of that?
I have. That's something I haven't thought of that in a long time though, so I don't think I can speak to that right now. What I do know is that here. So what happens is during your fertile time when estrogen levels are high and the cervix is allowing sperm to get in, they can stay in the cervix, hanging, chilling, waiting for 3 to 5 days. And then if ovulation happens within those 3 to 5 days, the egg leaves the ovary and it sends a biochemical messenger to the sperm saying, I'm here. And the sperm, whether they're in the cervix or already hanging around in the uterus, they rush up through the fallopian tube and race to be the one that fertilizes her.
Wow.
So I do remember reading something very similar to what you're talking about, but I haven't thought about that in a long time. I do know that when one sperm penetrates the egg creates like an armor that prevents any more penetration from occurring.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the egg goes on about a week journey, 7 to 10 days, down the fallopian tube
Oh, crazy.
as it's shedding and like cleaving and growing, and it will implant itself into the uterus about a week later.
Oh man, this is so interesting. You know, one of the pieces that I found really fascinating was the fact that when the egg gets released from the ovary, it kind of like tears through the wall, and then it's like seemingly floating in like outer space in that area. And like the way that it's like, I kind of think of it like a hand of the fallopian tube kind of like moves to grab the egg. It's like, whoa, it's alive down there.
Absolutely. In fact, many people can feel this. So we're not 100% sure if what they're feeling is that burst out of the ovary, if they're feeling the contractions of those fimbriae, those fingers, but many people get these sensations. Maybe they're tingling sensations or a little bit of dull pain or stabbing sensations in one side of their abdominals or in their back, and they'll be able to tell you which ovary they're ovulating from. And there's a word for that. It's Mittelschmerz. It means middle pain in German.
Mittelschmerz.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. You know what? Now that we're like actually talking about that, I think I have actually personally felt that before. I just didn't realize that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. I'm really excited for when this is like all normally taught in like schools to youth, and everybody knows the way that their bodies work and the way conception works, because when you actually look at it, it's like just amazing. It's such a miracle that we're not even educated to know what's going on inside of our own bodies. So the sperm, it can survive for up to 5 days, but it has to have that fertile nectar or cervical mucus present. That's what allows them to survive. Correct?
Exactly.
And
because
there's
if there's no mucus, the hotel's closed and they're dying in the lobby within minutes.
I love all of your analogies. It's so fun. Yeah. So when there isn't cervical nectar there, the vagina atmosphere is very acidic, and it like that's the protection for the womb, which is why it's acidic, because it like burns everything up, like all of the germs and everything, to protect your womb. And it also kills sperm unless there's this magical nectar present, which is creating this beautiful river for them to flow up.
I always use red carpet, but I love the river flowing analogy. Thank you. I'm going to take that. That's right. That's absolutely right. And so most people don't realize that on most days of their cycle, their vagina is a sperm killing machine.
Yeah. You can't actually get pregnant every single day of the month. That was just mind blowing to me when I initially learned it. So just going into a little bit more about cervical fluid, what is it that you observe about it, and what types of differences do the different observations mean?
Yeah. So when you are observing your cervical mucus, we use, again, I teach the Justice method, and we use the 3 C's. So let me pull this up for you. The 3 C's.
I love your style of teaching, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Fun and very informative.
Excellent. That's what I'm going for. So the 3 C's of mucus are color, consistency, and change. So color, you look at the color of the mucus. Is it white or kind of cloudy? Is it clear? Is it kind of cloudy clear? Is it yellow? Maybe it's brown, red, or pink. So these are some of the colors you will see in cervical mucus. Then we look for the consistency. And the consistency is how far can you stretch it? So is it like a sticky consistency where it breaks right away? Is it a stretchy consistency where it's like, whoa, it stretches for an inch or more? Or is it somewhere in the middle, which we call tacky? And then the last
And
change, oh, sorry, go ahead.
before you go to the next one, I just want to clarify for people who are really new to this. When you say stretch, you're meaning actually getting some of it on your finger and pulling your fingers apart to see
That's
the
right.
viscosity, stretchiness of it.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, we get to touch it and play with it. And yes. And then when I first say that, sometimes we're like, no. And the next thing you know, they're drinking their menstrual blood. So just be careful, okay? Be careful when you start this. So yeah, so you actually pick it up off of your toilet paper and you pull it apart and you look at how far it will stretch before it breaks. And then the last C is change. And this one is the most subtle, but the most important. And this is actually the basis of fertility awareness, is that you're not the same every day. And that there is a change in cervical mucus, whether there's none and then there's some, whether it's cloudy or now it's clear, or whether it was a sticky or now it's tacky. So we pay attention to how the mucus changes throughout the cycle, throughout the day, throughout the years. And then sensation is also super important because sometimes the cervical mucus is so high in water content, there's nothing to even pick up. And so if you were ever using the washroom and you had some toilet paper and you wiped and it was so like, whoa, lubricative that your elbow hit the back seat of the toilet, that was a fertile day. So that lubricative sensation also tells us, yes, I'm fertile today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Mm-hmm.
Feel inspired to pay more attention to my nectar more now.
Well, let me show you a picture. Here's one.
Okay. It's really good to normalize stuff because it's really good to normalize this stuff because we're not used to being this intimate with our bodies, and this can be kind of uncomfortable for women who like are really new to this, to be like so focusing on bodily fluids and and like looking at examples from other women. But I think that the more that we talk about it, the more normal it gets and the less weird, you know?
That's exactly why I'm always posting pictures on my Instagram from my cervical mucus. Look, this is normal. I couldn't tell you how many people I've spoken to that didn't know that it was normal. Like I've spoken to people who have thought that every time they saw their mucus, they thought they had an STI or a yeast infection.
Wow.
I know of a story of a couple who was trying to conceive, but every single time the woman saw this cervical mucus, she thought it was an infection and she didn't want to give it to her husband. So they avoided sex during that time and couldn't conceive. They were actually practicing really great birth control. So it's just so many of us grow up not knowing that this is normal. Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
This is an example of a mucus that is sticky. So you can see doesn't stretch very far. It's also kind of pasty, like school glue from a glue stick. And this is cloudy in color. Mm-hmm. And all cervical mucus is fertile. So even this is a fertile cervical mucus.
So I'm like wondering, there's like different stages of the cycle that like different textures would be more normal or expected.
Mm-hmm. So when I'm looking at cervical mucus patterns, what's normal, and I don't really like the word normal, it's mostly what's your variation of normal. You'll see people having around 3 to 6 days of cervical mucus, sometimes a little bit more, especially in periods of stress. And we want to see at least 1 day of peak type cervical mucus. So peak type cervical mucus is mucus that's either clear in color, stretchy in consistency, or has that lubricative feeling when you wipe.
Yeah.
So how the mucus, and some people, they jump right into peak type mucus, while others have more of this gradual, change from this kind of non-peak mucus to more peak type mucus. And again, going back to this whole idea that this is a mini lab, test every single day, we can see when we look at people's cervical mucus patterns, what's happening with their estrogen and progesterone. Because we know when progesterone is dominant, there's no mucus. And then when estrogen starts to rise, we start to see cervical mucus. So of course, when cervical mucus first starts to come down, the cervix is up high in the vagina, right? And we have cells that slough off of our vaginal walls called vaginal cell slough. So when the mucus first comes down the vagina, it can mix with this cell slough, giving it this pasty, sticky, cloudy consistency. And then as your estrogen levels rise, you get more and more of peak type cervical mucus. So an example of peak type cervical mucus is something like that.
Yes.
So it's tacky, but it's clear. So it's the clear color that makes it peak. And then you might also see, is it? Yeah, no, I guess that's what I got from my peak mucus today. This is one of my favorite ways of describing this, is because some people, they have this misconception that there's mucus that's more fertile than others. So the non-peak mucus is only a little bit fertile, or maybe not even at all, some people believe, whereas the peak type mucus that kind of looks like raw egg whites is the fertile mucus. But it is a bad habit to get into this language that mucus is more fertile than others. It's similar to when we're pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not, right? You can't be more pregnant. However, you can be closer to your due date, right?
Yeah.
So mucus is the same thing. You're either fertile or you're not, but you can be closer to ovulation. And just like in pregnancy, the closer to your due date, the bigger you are and the more, ready you are, the more peak type the mucus becomes, the closer you are to ovulation. And this is because of the influence of estrogen. But don't get into this habit of thinking that mucus is more fertile than others. It's all fertile. It's all fertile, baby. Nice and juicy.
Thank you for explaining that. I just, I want you to clarify something for me, because I know that you're saying that all cervical mucus is fertile and we're not fertile every day of the month. So I'm just like, I'm curious about that, because like a natural healthy environment of a vagina is moist. It's meant to be moist all the time. And so I'm just like wondering, how do you tell when you're fertile and when you're not? Because what if you're not around that like fertile phase, but your yoni is still producing moisture? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you tell between just like your yoni keeping itself moist and there being fertile mucus?
The golden rule of thumb, essentially for me and what I teach, is if you can pick it up off of your toilet paper, it's mucus and it's fertile. So one of the first lessons or skills you need to learn when you start becoming fertility aware is the ability to distinguish between cervical mucus, arousal fluid, vaginal cell slough, and seminal fluid. And you also have to become confident on how to identify your dry days. So your dry days are days when you don't see any cervical mucus. However, like you've already pointed out, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bone dry. You can have days where it's damp on the tissue. You can have days where it's wet. You can have days where it's kind of shiny. And these are all normal, happy, healthy days in your menstrual cycle where you're infertile, but not bone dry. And so learning to be able to distinguish between all of these things is part of what I do. It's part of what I teach people.
That's really awesome. Now that you bring that up, I actually am like recalling times when I noticed that I am a lot drier than other days, and I didn't even know if that.
Look at that, you observing that change, the most important C.
Totally. Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really informative. I'm really excited to be able to share that with the ladies. So I wonder how long you feel like it takes for a woman to really get this down, to trust it. Let's just say like to avoid pregnancy. How long do you?
3 cycles. So when I teach, I work with people for a minimum of 3 cycles. So I want them to gain the confidence. I want them to learn the skill. I want them to be able to interpret their own signs, right? And because that's where the power becomes, right? And it's, of course, it is it's your responsibility. So it takes 3 months to get the habit to, learn all of the signs, to learn how to observe them, to describe them and to chart them, and then to interpret what you see. So 3 cycles.
Awesome. It sounds like such an empowering practice for a woman to establish, like really knowing your body more, knowing what's going on. I just feel like that alone has to give a woman much more confidence just in general, don't you think?
100%. And one of the ways that I like to talk about this is with PMS. So we get such a bad rap, being people who cycle and who menstruate and ovulate, and you're just PMSing, or you're just going to get your period right away. And it's difficult because even with hormonal birth control, we're just trying to turn women into mini men who don't change and who stay the same. And yeah, it's absolutely true that you may feel more charismatic, more enthusiastic in your first half of your cycle. And then in the second half, you might find you feel a lot more introverted, more calm, this is what progesterone does. Progesterone is a chill pill. It makes you want to stay home and clean your house or read a book instead of go out and party, or, go out and hang out with your friends, or have a barbecue. And so when you begin to live and flow with your cycle and realize these things and what's normal and your variation of normal and what's not, you become more empowered, and it's okay not to feel the same every day. And
Definitely.
don't get me wrong, sometimes I speak to people who become suicidal. I speak to people who have very difficult mood changes or physical changes, and this is not okay. But it's not that you're broken, it's that your body is talking to you. Something is amiss. Right? And you can use this information to guide you to your next steps on how to become the healthiest, happiest version of yourself. So super empowering, super empowering. And we're talking about adding a couple of minutes to your day to finger text some mucus or to take your temperature. Worth it.
Totally. Yeah, I was very fascinated when I did it, and I'm going to start again one of these days.
Yay!
I feel newly inspired from talking to you about it all.
I'm so happy to hear it.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of rewind a little bit and also kind of connect back in with what you're saying right now. I was just thinking about when you were talking about how you lost your ovulation for a while and how it was linked to a really challenging breakup experience that you had. I just want to speak to that for a minute and bring shed some light on how deeply connected our physiology is with our emotion and our mental states, because that's something that I definitely feel like the modern Western allopathic medicine practice does not consider when it comes to their diagnosis. And you're not the only woman that I've heard of there being a very distinct symptom with their menstrual cycle and some sort of really big stress in their life. So I just wanted to talk about that for a second, because I think that kind of misses people's awareness oftentimes, and we tend to get stuck and obsessed on this physical ailment, and we don't even stop to look at our life holistically and think about what could be the cause, because we're so trained to think that we're just this physical body and this is the way it works on a physical level, but we're so much more than that. And just like you said earlier, your body talks to you. It really is this amazing, intelligent creation that talks to you. It just doesn't use words. It uses sensations and patterns, and when we start to observe the body from a different lens, more just curious, what could you be trying to tell me? What could you be trying to communicate to me? Not what caused this, what's messed up in my body or diet or whatever, just to just to kind of like turn your focus on your body with curiosity and like an inquiring mind, and actually like sit with it and ask it what it is saying to you.
I
'Cause
love that word, curiosity. Curiosity before judgment.
definitely.
And you said it so beautifully. When things come up, you just you're curious, right? I see so few cycles. You know, sometimes even my own, I was flipping through my own cycles. It's such a luteal phase thing to do. And like I said, I bled today, so I'm day 1. It's such a luteal phase thing. So you're so reflective. I just want to like take 8 years worth of charts, because I always chart on paper. And I just put them all over my room and I just look at them all. Like, you know, and I name them all. So it's like, the month where I lived in Vietnam, or the month where, it was the worst breast tenderness ever. And so I just look through them all. And so it's so rare too that I find, these perfect textbook charts in myself and in other people. And this is not an invitation to berate yourself or think you're broken or not working. And it is simply an invitation to be curious. What was,
Totally.
So eating pho every day, eating pho every day, that's what happened to my cycle. Or, oh, interesting how that's what was happening in my life this month, and that's how my cycle, looked. Or, I quit caffeine for this month. Look what happened to my cycle there. And to be curious. I love that. Yeah, to get curious.
Definitely. And like to like when you start actually charting the actual physical aspect of it, and also just remembering how important it is to just note a little bit about your life then and your emotions. Like I've been just keeping track of my menstruation for like 3 years now. And I have been like starting to add more to it so that I can look back at it and really start to observe patterns, especially the more I get into this work and I learn about how there's like certain days in the cycle that you can feel like a significant shift. And if you take note of those, then sometimes you can hone into a specific day in each cycle that affects you a certain way. So you know that that's what it is. And
yeah. I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about how cool this practice is for your partners. So no matter who your partner is, no matter how many partners you have, I always invite my partner into my fertility awareness practice. And it's so funny because when you're talking about emotional changes, sometimes I'll have conversations with, my partner and he'll bring something up and I'm like, this is not a luteal phase conversation. We need to save this for the follicular Chloe. Or do you know what I mean? Just having that awareness of what I'm open to receiving or not open to receiving, depending on where I am in my cycle. Or one of my favorite memes. Oh, I wish I knew who wrote this originally. But if you don't deserve me in my luteal phase, sorry. Let me restart. You don't deserve me in my follicular phase if you can't handle me in my luteal phase.
I love that.
Having this awareness of how your emotions change in your cycle too, like you're mentioning, is and I think it's fantastic, like that you're charting and that you're paying attention to your menstruation, because that's where it begins, and it's also the most obvious. Like, I'm bleeding. It's very obvious. Write it down, right? And then a couple cycles later, you decide, I'm also gonna start paying attention to my mucus, right? And maybe you don't even write it down, you just pay attention. And then maybe your next step is, I'll write it down. And then maybe your next step is, I'm gonna figure out what's going on with my temperature. And then next thing you know what, you're checking your cervical position. Next thing you know what, you're charting your bowel movements and your exercise routine and your moods. And it's just, it's so in your control. Whatever you want. You can just chart menstruation, or you can chart your whole life. Like, it's totally up to you. And that's what I love about charting, is that it's all up to you, right?
Totally.
And you have the control, you have the decision about what you want to pay attention to, what you want to do with this information. It's just, I fall in love with it every time I talk about it. So
it's like imagining if a woman was to chart in detail, like all of the things that you just said, like their bowel movements, their emotions, their different exercising patterns for like 10 years, and then like went back through all of it, like I just like can't imagine the like actual scientific research and conclusions that could come out of that for all women. Like that's the type of thing that I'm like, that is so invaluable. Like you can't replace that, and it requires serious devotion over a long period of time. It reminds me of scientists who are so devoted to like some type of work that they spend their entire life studying it, and their life's work changes the face of the planet in some way because they stayed devoted to it and discovered things that help all of humanity. And that's kind of what I feel like is potential in this type of thing for women. I just, yeah, it's pretty awesome. Oh yeah, and I also just wanted to comment about your the way that you involve your partners in it, because it's definitely something that needs to just like be normalized amongst men also. And I just was like thinking about what the world would be like if like everybody's partner was educated on this. Like if everyone's partner knew about this, they understood the cyclical nature of their partner, they would be able to support them better. They would just change the freaking world.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you do that.
I also use it as a litmus test. So like, if you want to get with me, you got to get with my mucus, right? So if you don't, if this grosses you out, or if, you know, then you're not my partner, then you're not the partner for me. So I use it as my own litmus test too. And I have been very blessed. And right now my partner checks my basal body temperature for me. So like that's his role. He like puts the thermometer under my arm, and it's so sweet because he's gotten so good at it that he'll put the thermometer in, but then he'll hug me and he'll guess. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're 36.7. And he's always right. That's what's really so cute. So just involving them, and you know, it doesn't have to be with the temperature, but even the conversation, even just, you know, so the benefits that come from when you can start talking about your bodily, you know, fluids, or, you know, the changes in your cycle and your feelings with your partner, what does that open up to all of the possibilities and all of the conversations you can have with one another? It's beautiful and challenging. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to make it sound like it's super easy all the time.
Sure.
But
that's where we grow.
Yeah, it's definitely an invitation for growth.
Litmus test. Somebody just told me that recently, and I didn't quite grasp what they meant by it, but I get it now that you just said that, and it actually makes me think about what I didn't know that I made this as a litmus test for myself. But when I initially went through what I called my divine feminine awakening, which was like just this massive bursting of this roaring feminine energy within me, that's when I stopped taking birth control. I stopped using tampons. I threw all my bras away. I didn't wear makeup for years. And I just like didn't shave or trim any part of my body hair for like 2 years. It was like the first time that I saw my armpit hair. And I dated somebody during that time, and it was like the first time that it was a guy who I felt like didn't care about me having hair under my armpits or on my legs. And I was like, oh man, I can't ever date anyone else who wouldn't love me hairy. And so that kind of has like been my standard litmus test. Like, you got to be at that level of consciousness and comfortability for me to just like be my full authentic self, or no.
I love that.
That reminded me of. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Chloe. I just love your bubbly, fun, highly educational presence and personality. I really enjoyed doing this session with you. I know there's a lot of women that are going to receive this and just absolutely love it too. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing yourself with us.
It's my pleasure. Any chance I can get to talk about cervical mucus, this wonderful nectar of fertility, I'll take it. So thank you so much for asking me and for including me in your summit. And
Yay.
yeah, may all periods be positive.
Oh, I love that. Is that a t-shirt? We should start a t-shirt company.
Let's.
Okay, I think we're about ready to wrap it up. Before we finish up, I just want you to share a little bit about the services that you're offering right now.
So the best way to keep in touch with me and to get in the flow with what I offer and what I do is to follow me on social media. So I'm on Instagram at Chloe Skerlak. It's just my first name and my last name. Essentially just Google Chloe Skerlak and I'll show up. My website, my Facebook, my Instagram. I offer services one-on-one. I teach online. So like I said, I like to work with people for at least 3 cycles. Often throughout the year, I put on group programs. And when I'm feeling really like follicular and ovulatory, I put on cervix portrait parties, where I take pictures of people's cervixes for them. And I'm also getting really excited in offering period positivity workshops now for parents and preteens. So always something new and fun and exciting happening. So to follow along, just follow me on social media. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I apologize for anybody who notices that I'm a little distracted. Sometimes I have a kitten around here who's going puberty right now.
Totally.
He's a little confused and behaving a little differently, but we're hanging in there. Okay, so one other thing, you are offering a free 5-day challenge. Is that what it is to the audience?
Yeah, I've been calling it a free 5-day Cycle Savvy challenge. And it's just 5 videos, really short videos on something that you can do to start your fertility awareness journey.
Beautiful. Awesome. I will include the link and all of your contact info for anybody who's interested in accessing all of that. Thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And I hope you all have a beautiful day. And I will see you for another episode. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Aloha.